Without further ado, it's time to move on to our first speaker. That will be Tommaso Calarco. It's a pleasure to introduce him for me. Dr. Tommaso Calarco is the director of the Institute for the Quantum Control of the Peter Grünberg Institute at the Forschungszentrum Jülich. He's the godfather to the European quantum flagship. Back in 2016, he authored the Quantum Manifesto, which got the ball rolling in the European Commission, and he has since tirelessly put more energy into keeping that ball rolling than I can even imagine. Sincere kudos, Tommaso, much appreciated. I'm looking forward to the latest from the European Commission kitchens on the quantum flagship. Tommaso, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. You know, the Swiss Quantum Day is always a very exciting event. I have also previously participated, and I'm happy to report today some progress and also what lies ahead, and also some challenges which are currently taking place. So let me share my screen, which I hope you can now see my presentation now. And well, let me start by summarizing. Well, first I have a little bit of a recap what a flagship is, but very quickly, for those who might not be completely familiar with that, then I will discuss what is taking place and what are the next steps which are lying ahead. So essentially, as Sadiq has already reminded us, the flagship started already a couple of years ago. And we just had our midterm review. So we received in the Strategic Advisory Board a few days ago the midterm review, which the Commission has finalized. Is still not public because the Commission really wants to make a big announcement. And I think they will have a blog post on the Commission website on this soon. So I cannot yet spoil the surprise, but I can tell you that there are many interesting results which will be reported there. So here, the first slide, just very quickly, is to remind us all what quantum technologies are. Like quantum technologies of the second quantum revolution, it goes beyond what we have been doing in the past, which has been using, quantum phenomena on the bulk level. Now, what we do is do engineering, at the moment, engineering individual quantum systems, and this is what brings us to the next generation quantum technologies, which, essentially deal with individual photons, electrons, atoms, molecules, circuits in solid state to enhance and improve the capability of devices for industry and market. So there are a few areas, and these are the areas which we base our European initiative upon. And one is metrology, for instance, ultra-precise clocks, which are used for navigation, for time-stamping financial transactions, and many other things in standards. There are, from the sensing side, a lot of applications in life sciences, in medical imaging techniques, and there are a lot of startups, for instance, and many of them, of course, in Switzerland. I still have here, the little box which Klaus Ensling gave me, box of cards with, all these cards which their project has prepared. I'm very jealous because I would like us in all of Europe to get such a beautiful sort of showcase of startups, and many of them, as I mentioned, are really coming from Switzerland. But this is, of course, increasing and getting stronger and stronger in all of Europe. Of course, again, a very big Swiss success story is quantum key distribution, secure quantum communications. The leader company in this IDQ is, of course, in Geneva, and there might be, I hope, some interesting developments along those lines also in the next future. And of course, more longer term, there is the area of quantum computing, in which also there are a few startups coming out of our flagship projects, which I will mention in the next presentation, as well as other applications in sensing beyond the ones which we have already mentioned. And last but not least, of course, simulation. One should say that we in Europe put quantum simulators on the agenda in our quantum manifesto since the beginning, but as a matter of fact, simulation is one of the main applications which companies such as Google and IBM are really advertising and promoting for their first prototypes of quantum computers. So this is really at the center of the debate. Now, what is the Quantum Flagship? Well, this is, as you know, a long-term research initiative, about 10 years, to bring everything from the lab to the market. Not only research institutions from academic type, but also industry, different enterprises, and also policymakers to collaborate in a scale which actually we have not seen before. And this scale, the scale of investment, should even be enhanced now. I will tell you that, so I will come to that point in a moment. So the general goals are building on the scientific leadership and excellence, which is available at European level, and then also kickstart European industry and enhance European competitiveness in order for Europe to become a dynamic and attractive region, both for research and business, as well as investment. We are seeing growing initiatives also in this sense. So we started exactly 2 years ago with our kickoff meeting in Vienna. There are more than 2,000 scientists involved in projects. The total investment, actually, the first stage was 152 million euros. The ramp-up phase, and over the whole duration is foreseen 1 billion from the European Commission. And at the moment, we have about 20 projects, and they are divided in 4 pillars for applications, plus 1 for basic science. So there is quantum communication. We have 4 projects. I will give a few details on that in a moment. And then there is, of course, quantum simulation, which we just mentioned. We have 2 big projects. In quantum sensing and imaging and metrology, there are also 4 smaller projects. And then in computing, again, 2 big projects, which I will illustrate in a moment, also with the startups coming out of them, and a broader constellation of 7 projects in basic science. So let me detail a little bit what this is. So in quantum computing, there are 2 main projects which deal with ions and superconducting qubits, quantum computing. There is another one currently in negotiation. It has been approved by the European Commission, and this is on semiconductor qubits. And I believe in each of these projects, and I should not repeat it for every, but essentially, I guess in almost all of the projects, there are Swiss partners and companies which are involved. Interesting is that from the project Action on ion traps, the startup AQT, Alpine Quantum Computing, came out, which started its operation and is commercializing first prototypes of ion trap quantum computers. So on quantum communication, we have 4 projects. One is specifically tied towards quantum random number generators, so specific components, also on continuous variable quantum communication, CIVIC, and also on quantum key distribution, Unicorn. KIA is sort of a more comprehensive project, which is the title is Quantum Internet Alliance, so it is moving towards the vision of a quantum internet. I will come back to that afterwards. In simulation, we have 2 projects, Pasquans, dealing with neutral atoms and Rydberg atoms, quantum simulators in optical traps, and COMS, which is a specific type of quantum simulator for developing quantum cascade lasers. Also in Pasquans, we have startup Pascal, which is already commercializing, sort of putting on the market. Not yet, you cannot yet purchase that, but they are providing in the near future quantum simulators based on Rydberg atoms in dipole traps with, at the moment, up to 100 qubits, 100 individual elements, and they are already working at the next generation, which is, I think, twice as much. So in quantum sensing, we start with, again, there are the different dimensions of, nano sensing for biological applications and also magnetometry. For instance, this is what we have in the project Asterix. And then we have a project IQ Clock on portable integrated quantum clock. We also have another one, is metabolics, is again at Maximal. They are again also about magnetometry and also based on different technologies on vapor cells in Maximal, and also in metabolics, again, NV centers, color centers in Diamond, which is for the purpose of more dedicated life sciences applications. And then there is a range of different projects in the basic science area, and they deal with, either like QMix, developing new ideas for manipulation of existing platforms. For instance, in this case, ion traps with novel ideas to enhance the performance, as well as, for instance, different photon sources or different other aspects where it's not yet so mature that you can already go into the prototyping phase, but they deal with some very promising aspects which might be in the next stage of the flagship developed into actual applications. So these are the examples that we have. Many of them are dealing with photonic technologies and integrated photonics and single photon sources, and again, new methods like micro QC, which I mentioned, new methods for ion trap quantum computing in this case. All of this is coming together in even a broader perspective. And so here is where I would like to sketch a little bit this broader perspective that we have. So, you see on this diagram, we have, essentially both ends of the scale. On one end, there is Horizon Europe, which is the research part. And the opposite end of the spectrum is a new program, which is called Digital Europe. So Horizon Europe is where the research related to the flagship is taking place. And it starts with a big pan-European collaboration between national funding agencies. So this is Quantera. Quantera, already in its first edition, they issued 2 calls by pooling resources from national funding agencies to bring together multinational teams with projects which are, let's say, similar in structure to European projects that we know and appreciate, but they are really funded from the national level. So it was, I think, the largest existing international cooperation between national funding agencies. So in the previous stage, it had 32 funding agencies from 28 members and associated states of the European Union. And now it has gone up to, I think, 36 and about 30, from about 29 or 30 states in the next edition, Quantera 2, which has been just approved and is being negotiated. I believe it is soon to be started. So this will run for the next 7 years. And one important idea, of course, I should again mention that the Swiss Science Foundation is very strongly involved there since the beginning. And this is going towards, since the instrument IRANET, so this possibility of funding agencies to come together and deliver this kind of joint calls is not being continued in the next framework program, Horizon Europe, this will also be the basis for some other, probably more structured way of cooperation between national states to give maybe even more stability in the future, to quantum technologies. Then we have, of course, here the quantum flagship that we just discussed, which is, the goals that we have discussed with European projects. So there are both the national member states and the European sides of this undertaking. Of course, there are also national programs in many countries, big and small. There are national initiatives going in this direction. We are also trying to bring all of this together in the quantum community network, which I have the privilege to be chairing. It's one of the 3 governing bodies of the flagship. We are trying to create a network of national quantum initiatives from, let's say, for instance, Hungary, which is devoting 11 million euros to quantum technologies over 5 years, to maybe the opposite end is Germany, which is devoting 2 billion euros to the building a German and European quantum computer. And what is nice is that a clear goal there from these national initiatives is to be aligned and to be in synergy with the European undertaking. So this is something which then is bringing us towards the other end of the scale, which is the Digital Europe program, where we are essentially taking the prototypes, the devices which are developed in the research part, and bringing them to fruition for society. And there are 2 aspects of that, which are infrastructural aspects, on communication and on computing, okay? So I have a couple of slides on that, which are going to outline that. What is the quantum communication infrastructure EuroQCI? So here the idea is to take quantum cryptography systems and integrate them into existing critical communication networks, both terrestrial and at satellite level. And so finally, also the European Space Agency has gotten involved. And here in the background, here you see the 2 possibilities, sketched in what we call an artist view, in the sense that it can either go via terrestrial links, either free space or with fiber, but it also goes via satellite. We have seen that there have been demonstrations in this sense, for instance, in China. We know that in the US there is a secret program with a quantum satellite as well, but here in Europe we are also moving in that direction. What are the goals? The goal is to essentially create a backbone for the quantum internet, for this broader vision of the quantum internet. I will detail that in a moment again. And this has the goal to protect data networks, also to distribute clock synchronization for navigation and for commercial applications and other things like e-voting. And again, I should remind everybody that protection via quantum resources of let's say, voting procedures, the first time it happened was in Geneva, I think several years ago, again supported by the group of Nicolas Gisin at the University of Geneva and also by Eddy Quantique. So this is really, again, a success story which from Switzerland is propagating towards the rest of Europe, one could say. Now, what about the European quantum computation and simulation infrastructure? The idea is similar. Let's take, quantum devices, so the first hardware devices based on different technologies which are being delivered by the quantum flagship, and integrate them with simulation of quantum hardware on classical high-performance computers, and then bring all of this together, also in testbed facilities, if you wish, both for hardware developers to make this available to a broader audience, similar to what one could say IBM is doing, only IBM is doing this with the IBM Quantum Experience just for their own ecosystem. Here the idea is we do it with an open ecosystem in which all components can come together for the development to give this possibility to play with these systems for software developers in different companies to develop quantum applications and also validate the advantages which come from quantum computation for an increasing range of applications and algorithms. So this is the idea that we have, and it all converges in the broader ultimate goal, which is a quantum internet. So the hope there is that we are going to be able, starting from the European Quantum Communication Infrastructure, EuroQCI, and integrating it in the future with the European Quantum Computing and Simulation Infrastructure, EuroQCS, to bring this all together in a quantum internet in which quantum computers are going to be connected and quantum simulators connected by quantum channels in a quantum internet, hopefully in the future also with quantum repeaters, which will really create a quantum internet on a continental scale, as well as distributing and connecting in a secure way data from quantum sensors. And of course, this quantum internet has different components, which are both terrestrial and space. And all of this is now starting to take shape in the next framework program. So the state is we are building the next stage. So the challenge we have is to, of course, in the context of the crisis, there have been a lot of very good promises. Right before the crisis, the European Parliament had approved triplicating the budget for the European Commission side of the quantum flagship, because as we know, it should have been 1 billion, half from the Commission, half from member state. So 500 million from the Commission, 150 we gave out, like 50 per year, 1/10 per year in the ramp-up phase. So in the next 7 years, it would have been 350. The European Parliament proposed 1 billion euros. And now the problem is that the framework program, Horizon Europe, has been cut very severely by member states. Of course, Switzerland, this is something in which Switzerland is completely innocent, because you are not a member state. You participate, of course, in the programs with own contribution, but not in the decisions, because this is a decision which is made by member states. And member states decided, unfortunately, to cut that. So there is a strong danger that it will not come to this 1 billion that we have. And so we are fighting to keep this funding at the appropriate level. The work program for the next 2 years, so the next calls, are being discussed. And so essentially we need those resources, essentially 1/3 for the first of 3 stages of the framework program. We need that money. So please believe me that we are very strongly working with all delegations from all member states through the Quantum Community Network to make that happen. And this is something which is happening right now. A few days ago, there was the meeting of the ministers in the Council of the European Union, in which they agreed on the general cut for the budget, and now we have to fight to keep the priority high. Fortunately, we get a lot of support from many member states, and so we are optimistic, but this is by far not something which is concluded. Now, I wonder whether I should show these slides. Probably I will. So those are the next 3 slides in terms of state of play, just as an example of quantum computing. Zooming in on that, I borrowed those from Frank Wilhelm Mauch. These are coming essentially and strongly inspired by his report to the German BSI, the German Cybersecurity Agency, in which a couple of years ago, I believe, but maybe he will speak about that also later, he made a general classification of different quantum computing approaches. There is a variety of platforms, and there are different stages. At the moment, there are a few platforms which are beyond the basic functionality and also beyond the already stage of quantitative improvement, getting towards error correction. There is none at the moment above error correction. The next stages would be executing fault-tolerant operations with error correction, and then in the end, fault-tolerant algorithms. The most advanced are superconducting and atomic platforms, and we are entering actually the next era, the noise intermediate scale quantum technology era, which starts being interesting now. So for ion traps, we have ions which can be trapped electrically, and then the qubit is given by a single electron. It comes from previous technology, which was high precision measurement, which have been developed in atomic clocks. The ways of control manipulating these devices are based on lasers and microwaves, and there are a few teams which are leading. Of course, it would be a much longer list, but let's say that also connected to the startups that we have. In Innsbruck, we have this Alpine Quantum Technology, keeping high the flag of European ion trap quantum computing, and the main competitor is in Maryland, the company IonQ. And in Josephson qubits, we have, this is based on integrated circuits. Of course, here I should say that both in ion traps and superconducting qubits, there are very prominent groups. I'm thinking of Jonathan Hohmann and Andreas Wallraff, of course, at ETH, but they are not the only ones in Switzerland. So the idea of superconducting qubits is to come from superconducting metals and create small circuits which operate at very low very low temperature. The technological predecessor is SQUID, superconducting quantum interference devices, which were developed in the beginning as sensors and have been then turned into evolved versions for qubits. And here, this is where Google, IBM are leading on the industrial scale, and in terms of research consortia, there is a big center in Delft, and there is the project Open SuperQ, in which of course also ETH is involved. And we also have a startup, IQM, which is now started in Finland and now coming also to Germany. And of course, there is the Google supremacy experiment. Now, in the meantime, they regret having chosen the word supremacy because it does not have a very good connotation at the moment. But regardless of that, it is like the Wright brothers flight moment or Sputnik moment, if you wish, in which you do something, at least in terms of the Wright brothers, not extremely useful from a practical point of view, but of course opening the way for something which will probably come and showing that it is possible. So since we are talking about industry, and I have a couple more minutes, I want to mention what we are starting on the industry side. In the US, there exists a Quantum Economy Development Consortium, an industry consortium, QIDiS, which, by the way, copied our very beautiful pink color. If you do an RGB sampling of their logo, you will see it is exactly the same shade of pink that we started 2 years ago. So I'm very proud of my pink color here. But jokes apart, actually, on the structure of this Quantum Industry Consortium, we are a little bit behind. So we are about 1 year behind the US. And fortunately, we started. Even during the Corona crisis, we had a big teleconference, of course, with almost 300 participants from 24 countries and more than 150 companies participating. Here you see a view of all the people who were participating, and we sort of kicked off a process in which we are starting a lot of activities. So we have a series of work packages on market trends, on intellectual property, on education of the future workforce, on standards, on state of the art, on road mapping, on coordination, on building a European ecosystem, and also on funding and investment. And all of this is really taking shape. So over the summer, we have been really starting this, and we will have an actually more formal kickoff meeting in the context of the European Quantum Week, first week of November, in which we will again convene with the whole consortium really to start. We are preparing the bylaws for that, the statutes. So we have some interim working groups working on that. I'm saying this in detail because there is the possibility for all the companies which are engaged here. We explicitly want to keep it open beyond the EU 27. There are some restrictions because, for instance, the European quantum communication infrastructure, due to its strategic nature, the European Commission required a working group with only EU 27, EU member state participants. But the Quantum Industry Consortium, the QUIC, wants to be inclusive and have the possibility for everybody, also outside of the member states, to participate. So all of you are encouraged to participate. We are at the stage in which we sketched we defined the structure of this association. It will be probably an association according to German law. We are going into the details, and we will soon be in touch again with everybody who would like to join. Again, we strongly encourage you to contact us if that is the case. Also via the qt.eu web portal, we will soon have a dedicated website for the QUIC. So please contact us, please get engaged, and we will have the first round. Then here I come to the end of my presentation, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Wonderful presentation, great overview, and I couldn't be happier about the timing. We have a couple of questions. The first one, not surprising, since we have a large Swiss audience, can you in very clear terms say whether Swiss partners are able to participate in Flagship and Digital Euro projects?
And the answer is in very clear terms, yes, to the extent that, which we expect will happen, Switzerland will again be an associated state of the European Union for the purpose of the framework program, which means Switzerland, as it has always been the case, pays their contributions into the framework program, and then Swiss groups can participate as it has been the case until now. So the answer is yes.
Thank you. Then we have another one here. Which part of the Flagship communication, sensing, computing, simulation will first be realized in the Digital Euro program?
That is also an easy question, which is a clear answer, which is the quantum communication part. Because, and again, thanks to Switzerland, we do have in Europe the world market leader for quantum communication. We have a very strong quantum key distribution industry in Europe, and not only Switzerland in this case. And so it has been recognized in the context of the Euro QCI. Almost all member states in the meantime signed a memorandum of understanding in which they commit together to creating this infrastructure in which they will purchase those devices commercially and deploy them first in the European capitals, connect them via optical fibers, and then also via satellite in a second stage, and realize an infrastructure for secure communication based on commercial quantum key distribution. So this is going to be the first in quantum communication. And we have a working group to the Euro industry roadmap for this, which is working right now. As I mentioned, unfortunately restricted to EU27, but who knows what will be the developments in terms of quantum industry, perhaps also in EU27 member states. So let's hope that this can develop in a positive way.
Thank you. Then I think we have time for a last one, a bigger one. The Americans tend to sponsor a specific and ambitious project to push technologies in small and elite teams, whereas the Europeans emphasize infrastructure and community character. Do you agree with this assessment? And if so, how do you judge the merits of the two approaches?
So this assessment, I think, is a fair assessment as far as the ramp-up phase of the Flagship has been concerned. I think the merit of the European approach is that we are inclusive, not just because we want to be nice to each other, but because we enable all the resources, competence, and ideas to flow in and to contribute to European excellence, which is still world leading. On the other hand, the limitation of that might have been that we do not reach sufficient focus. And actually, this was just for the ramp-up phase. This current discussion for the next work program, as we discussed, the next calls of the European Commission, foresees next to the typical research and innovation actions, these sort of more bottom-up projects based on broad consortia, also framework partnership agreements, which is a technical term to say that you can have, well, not focused on specific centers, but certainly more focused efforts with a longer-term goal, with the flexibility of including and changing the necessary partners, but really to go in the direction of sort of more focused efforts. We are not doing that like the other flagships on graphene and brain, which just had one framework partnership agreement which governed everything, but we are having planning to have a couple of them in each of the pillars. So we are moving towards a more focused effort while not losing the community dimension here.
Thank you. Thank you, Tommaso. I think that was a very good answer. In the name of all listeners, which I believe are now more than 200, is that right? I'd like to thank you. And
thank you.
We go on to our next presenter, which